Good morning, YouTube. Welcome to the Reptile Barn. After an illness hiatus of several weeks, I am back with another uh, conservation topic kind of vlog, an episode of like what I've been doing on some Mondays, but obviously not the last several. And today's video is not very long. I just want to bring up a cautionary tale. Um, in the I don't know, mid 90s to early 2000s, all the way through, even later than that, up through the 2010s, it was a common refrain that wolves saved Yellowstone, right? The reintroduction of wolves saved Yellowstone. So, through the 70s and 80s, especially, but even earlier than that, elk populations in Yellowstone were going up, 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 up. There were really no wolves left in Yellowstone, and really most of the United States. They'd been very close to eliminated, and the ecosystem in Yellowstone was not as healthy as it ought to be. And things, major things were noticed. Beavers were disappearing. The types of trees that were able to grow were changing dramatically. And in the mid 90s, they finally were able to reintroduce wolves to Yellowstone. And over the next decade, 2 decades, a lot of positive changes were seen. A lot of willows that grow along riparian zones, which just means, next to streams and creeks and rivers and things like that, were coming back. Beavers were coming back. And that changes the waterways dramatically because they slow down flow. They build their dams, which means that the water is moving slower and it's much wider in a lot of places. And that allows for certain types of fish and amphibians to thrive that weren't before, and birds, and just, a lot of good things were happening. And it became very popular to give all the credit to wolves. And that kind of makes sense. As a apex predator, it does make scientific sense that they're going to have a kind of an outsized effect on the ecosystem. And they called it a trophic cascade, just meaning that this effect cascaded through the trophic levels, or you could think of it as the food web, or however you want to measure it. And this was very popular, and especially, I don't know what to call them, wildlife advocacy groups, some of whom are very responsible and some of them who are very kind of out there and crazy, loved this story. Just stop people from interfering and let nature take its course and everything is kumbaya and wonderful. It was kind of what they wanted the story to be. Well, only fairly recently have they really dug into the actual studies and the data and realized that this was mostly made up. It was what we wanted to see, right? It turns out there's a lot of predators in Yellowstone, and only wolves have been eliminated. There were still cougars, there were still grizzly bears, and the elk that were able to move around a lot, because elk are very, very mobile. Anytime they could leave Yellowstone and go into like Montana, there's a big old elk hunting season. A lot of them, even thousands of them, are being legally shot by humans. So there are a lot of pressures that started to reduce elk numbers, besides just wolves. Also, more and more people were like, guys, elk eat like 90% grass. They're not influencing the willows and the riparian zone very much. They also completely disregarded a gigantic wildfire that ripped through huge portions of Yellowstone right along that same time period, which kind of has a reset influence on everything, right? And they just didn't want to look into all these other factors. They just wanted it to be, oh, we introduced the wolves, and everything went back to normal, and everything was beautiful and natural, and pristine nature was reestablished, and it's so great. Now, is it bad that they reintroduced wolves? No, absolutely not. It's a really good thing to allow that ecosystem's natural predators to reestablish in the area. You know, because it was humans that had extirpated wolves for most of their range. It wasn't any, um, you know, massive weather events or starvation or disease or any, you know, kind of more natural cause. It was very human caused removal of wolves in the first place. So putting them back does restore some balance, but we have to be careful that even when the results look exactly like we want them in conservation or in any field, that is not an excuse to disregard the scientific method. We need to look at data. We need to assess the data with statistical models rather than just, ooh, I like this, I'm going to interpret it the way I want. It's so tempting, but we got to not do that, right? So was it a good thing that wolves got reintroduced into Yellowstone? Unquestionably. Did it magically transform everything in a trophic cascade back into pristine Garden of Eden? No, it didn't, right? And so that's just what I wanted to bring up today. Is this was a very, very famous conservation story at the time, to the point where decades later people are still talking about it. And for a long time, the scientific method was not properly utilized. And in conservation, which is what I'm talking about in this video, but I'm sure in any other field of science, we must not set aside the scientific method. And the results of this, you know, could have been worse, I guess, if it turned out that wolves were having some sort of bad effect and people just were closing their eyes to that. That could have been bad, but that's not the case. Everything is fine. Yellowstone's beautiful. Yeah, so that's just what I wanted to bring up for this quick video about another conservation topic. And there's a lot of writing out there on this topic. You could look up, you know, all sorts of things about this and find some of the data, you know, learn about the riparian zones and how that worked and what the effect of beavers were, why they left, why they're coming back, all sorts of things. But I just wanted to touch on the topic to bring it to your minds if it's something you wanted to look into further. So that is all. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, we're the Reptile Barn.